Hi, how are you? I would like to welcome you to our um, PowerPoint today and our discussions. And today, I and my buddy Joe English would like to discuss with you some questions about George Orwell's Shooting an Elephant. So, without further ado, let's share the PowerPoint together. All right, so as I said today, I would like to discuss with you a little bit about George Orwell's Shooting an Elephant. Okay, it's an essay written by George Orwell, and um, he lived in the period between 1903 and 1950, which means he lived during the first half of the 20th century. Okay, so what type of essay is Shooting an Elephant? Okay, it's an autobiographical essay in which George Orwell tries to save face and, you know, tell us something or share us something about himself and protect his reputation. And we will know in detail about these things in a bit. So it's an autobiography. So he himself, George Orwell, write it or wrote it about himself, telling us about what he think and what he did earlier in life, and commenting on that and so on, and on the incidents that happened to him, and so forth. Also, Shooting an Elephant can be seen as a reflective essay. Reflect from think, remunerate over what happened to you and your reactions towards what happened, towards the incidents that happened to you, your feelings towards that, and what you thought, and so on. He wrote about the incident that took place in the 1920s when he was a police officer in British ruled Burma. And we will, elaborate on that in a bit. Okay. In a reflective essay, what does the writer do? We just mentioned now that to reflect, meaning to remunerate over, incidents that happen to you and your own feelings and how you go about these things and so forth. So makes connection between a personal observation, what he thinks, his own feelings, his own, uptake on things, and relates that to universal themes or ideas such as the idea of love or honor or freedom and so on. So basically, in a reflective essay or in a reflective story, the writer reflects or thinks about the incidents that happened to him or her and tries to find connections between that and universal themes that would be of interest to people wherever and whenever they are. That's why we are still reading, works of art and novels and short stories and prose written by writers, whether novelists or dramatists, way back from the 16th century, say, for example, William Shakespeare. We still read and enjoy his plays because he didn't write about, or he did not write for people who share ideas from 16th century England or incidents that just happened there, he could see that connection and he could talk about universal themes and ideas that are of interest to us in the 21st century and will be also interesting and relevant as long as there are human beings. Also, in the reflective essay, the writer explores and reflects on his or her own actions and ideas. Okay, let's move to the idea of paradox. There is a paradox or an apparent discrepancy or contradiction in shooting an elephant. This is between George Orwell, who is he markets himself as an opponent of tyranny, colonialism, and imperialism. But at the same time, because he worked as a police officer representing the British authority in Burma when it was under British rule, he was somehow a representative of this colonial power. So there is this paradox between Orwell as defender of freedom and opponent of colonialism and tyranny and so forth. And this is his own belief. These are his own ideas as a writer. But as a police officer, early in life, he was about 20 years old or something. He had to do things, and this was necessitated by his job and his work as a police officer, a British police officer in Burma under the British was a British protectorate, or at a time of when Britain was taking over both India and Burma. This somehow represented the colonial power. So this was a contradiction between these two elements. So what is a paradox and where is it evident in the essay, Shooting an Elephant? As we just said now, paradox is a statement that appears to be contradictory. There is an apparent discrepancy between two things, you know, and it's evident in the essay between the role of Orwell, the writer, as an opponent of tyranny and colonialism and imperialism, and on one hand, and on the other, there's his role as a representative of colonial power, being a British police officer in Burma when it was under British rule. Okay. Let's share some other question. Why is there ambiguity in that essay? We are talking about George Orwell's Shooting an Elephant. There is ambiguity because of, this kind of discrepancy between Orwell's role in the incidents as described and his role as the author. Number 4, what writing technique did Orwell depend on his presentation of the climax of the incidents? It was cause and effect relationship. For example, cause, Orwell receives a call about a wild animal and he goes to investigate, and the effect or the result was that he finds a dead man. So cause effect, cause result. Okay. And what is the climax of incidents in any novel or essay or short story? Usually there is rising action at the beginning of the short story or the essay, and then we reach the climax when characters are interacting with each other and their actions get heated and intense because they are different. People are different, and each has different objectives and tries to achieve his or her objectives. So sometimes a clash happens. So when these things happen, this is the climax in the story or the novel. But somehow the writer tries to reach uh, solution to this problem, or what is called the anticlimax. So the action begins to fall, and in the end, there is a complete solution to the situation or the problem. That's the climax in a story. Okay, number five, what is the setting of the essay? We know the setting is usually about two elements, the place and the time. The place it was written and the time it was written in. So it was written in Burma. It's a Southeastern Asian country during the 1920s when it was under British rule, as we shared earlier. So the setting usually has two elements, setting of a novel or an essay or a short story or whatever a piece of literature we are talking about. We have the place and we have the time. So the place where these actions took place was Burma during the British rule, and it was in the 1920s. So the early 20th century. Okay, after a series of wars, we knew that the end of the 19th century, there was wars that broke out here and there in different regions of the world. And as a result of these wars and clashes, the British gained control of Burma and made it a province of British India. So both Burma and India were under the British Raj, or was, they both were under the British rule. The Burmese endured poverty and lack of political and religious freedom at the time, okay? And Orwell reflects on his experience there as an uh, inexperienced police officer who went to Burma at the age of 19 or 20, something like that. So, to recap, we just shared some ideas about George Orwell's Shooting an Elephant. This was written in Burma. The incidents were in Burma, which was under the British rule during the 1920s. And there is a contradiction or a paradox between the ideas of George Orwell as somebody who is a patron of freedom and an opponent of tyranny and colonialism and imperialism, and his job at the time as he, remunerates over it, and the incidents that happened to him when he was a British police officer in Burma, which, as we said, were under British rule. So somehow he was representing the colonial power on one hand, but his own personal ideas was those of and beliefs were those of freedom and were basically anti-colonialism and anti-imperialism. Okay, these are just some thoughts and reflections of George Orwell's, essay, "Shooting an Elephant." And it is said that the elephant here represents, it's symbolic, and it's a symbol of the decreasing power of the British Raj, or the British, as empire at the time, and which will gradually, lose its protectorates and lose the countries that were under its rule bit by bit. So it's also symbolic from that point of view, or people read it as an some kind of symbolism or representation of the decreasing of the British power and loss of its colonies or protectorates one after the other. Literature is very enjoyable to read, and it's a good record of what happened in the world here and there. And people read it mainly for pleasure, but there's always a takeaway that you can learn from reading literature, whether it be a novel, short story, essay, or drama. And we will be talking in, various videos about different literary forms and discussing some ideas about these plays and short stories and novels of interest to the learners of English. So till we meet in the next one, I wish you the best and see you.